His hands were on her face before she saw him coming. One moment she was standing on the courthouse steps alone in a crowd that was pressing and shouting and pushing cameras into spaces they did not belong. The next moment, the crowd split open. Not because anyone decided to move, because something in the atmosphere shifted, and every body in that crowd understood before any mind caught up that the man walking through it was not a man you stayed in the path of. And Kang Jae-won was walking straight toward her. Not toward his lawyers who were calling his name from the left. Not toward the waiting vehicles lined up at the curb. Straight toward her. He was tall, broad through the shoulders in a way that his perfectly fitted black suit did not conceal but contained. The kind of physical presence that did not need to announce itself because rooms had already been rearranging themselves around it for years. His face was sharp and still, and the kind of handsome that had nothing soft in it. The face of a man who had looked at dangerous things for so long that danger itself had stopped registering on his expression. She had spent 11 days sitting 12 feet away from him in a Manhattan courtroom. 11 days studying a man who never flinched, never reacted, never gave the prosecution or the packed gallery a single thing they could use against him. He had never once looked directly at her. Until right now. He stopped in front of her. Raised both hands slowly, placed them on either side of her face, and kissed her. Not softly, not tentatively, with the same absolute certainty she had watched him carry through 11 days of testimony that tried and failed to break him. 4 seconds, cameras flashing from every direction. 200 people completely silent. He pulled back, held her gaze for one long moment. Then he was gone, moving through the crowd toward a waiting black vehicle, his security closing around him like water filling a space. And Amara, Osi, was left standing on those courthouse steps with the whole world looking at her face. She stood 5'6" in her good flats, Ghanaian American, 29 years old. The kind of face that people trusted immediately without being able to explain why. High cheekbones, dark steady eyes that her father used to say looked like they had already seen the answer to whatever question you were about to ask. She was wearing her good navy dress because she had thought this morning that she should look like someone whose word meant something. She had not thought she would be on every camera in Manhattan by noon. She did not move. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. 4 words. "We know where you live." She looked up slowly. Across the street, leaning against a gray sedan, a man in a dark jacket was looking directly at her. Not at the crowd, not at the cameras, not at Jae-won departing vehicle. At her. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he got in the sedan and it pulled into traffic and was gone. The trees in the park across from the courthouse were stripped bare by November. Every leaf gone. Nothing left but the true essential shape of each branch reaching upward in the cold gray light. She did not know why she noticed them. She just did. Amara stood on those steps with the cold November air of Manhattan moving around her, and a stranger kiss still on her mouth, and the specific weight of a life that had just become something she did not yet have a name for. She had voted her conscience, and now someone was telling her they knew where she slept. This channel is growing because of people who believe stories with meaning deserve to be told. If this story stopped you in your tracks just now, do something simple. Like this video, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. Before we go back to Amara on that street in Manhattan, you need to understand something about the man who just kissed her. 12 years before, that courthouse, Seoul, South Korea. Kang Jae-won was 29 years old and he was standing outside a government building watching his younger sister walk out with nothing. Her husband had taken everything: the apartment, the accounts, the business she had built with 6 years of her own hands. He had connections in the right places, and she had none. And the law had looked at both of them and decided that connections counted more than evidence. Jae-won had stood outside that building with $112 in his wallet and watched his sister walk toward him with her eyes dry, because she had finished crying 3 days ago and had moved into a place past tears that was quieter and more frightening than grief. He had put his arm around her. He had said, "I am going to fix this." She had said, "You cannot fix this. This is how the world works." He had said, "Then I will build a different world." It had taken him 12 years. It had cost him things he could not fully account for. But he had built something that meant no one with his name attached to them would ever stand outside a building with nothing again. He had built it for his sister. He had built it so that powerlessness was a condition he would never be in and never allow around him again. What he had not accounted for in 12 years of building was the possibility that someone might walk into his world not needing his power, not needing his protection, not needing anything from him at all except the truth. He had not accounted for Amara Osi. He was beginning to understand that this was the most significant miscalculation of his career. The same evening, a hotel room on the 14th floor of a midtown Manhattan property. The kind of room that cost enough to signal seriousness without being memorable enough to be traced. Daniel Reeves was 54 years old and had the face of a man who had long ago stopped distinguishing between business and the things that were not business. He sat on the edge of the bed in a pressed shirt and spoke into his phone with the particular calm of someone who had never once in his professional life raised his voice because he had never needed to. "The jury came back, hung," the voice on the other end said. Kang walked. "I heard," Daniel said. "One juror, a teacher. She held the room for 2 days. I heard that too. What do you want to do?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window, the city outside doing what it always did, moving and bright and completely indifferent. "Find out everything about her," he said. "Her brother, her finances, the things she loves, the things she is afraid of losing." He paused. "Everyone has a door. You just have to find the right key." "And Kang?" "Kang just became findable," Daniel said. "For 12 years, he has had nothing we could use. And then a teacher in a navy dress held a jury room for 2 days, and now he kissed her on the courthouse steps in front of every camera in the country." He stood up, straightened his shirt. "Find the brother," he said. "Atlanta. And be gentle about it. For now." He ended the call. He looked at the window for a moment longer. "For now," he said again. To no one, just reminding himself of the word, the specific patience it required, the specific promise it contained. She started walking, away from the courthouse, away from the cameras, away from the crowd that was already pulling out phones and pointing at her face. She walked fast with her bag on her shoulder, and her heart rate climbing, and her mind moving through everything that had brought her to this moment. 11 days. That was how long it had taken to get here. She was a 3rd-grade teacher from Queens. She taught 8-year-olds in Jamaica, Queens. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment she had furnished carefully on a teacher salary, every piece chosen because it meant something. She called her brother Kofi in Atlanta every Sunday. Kofi, who was 23 years old and studying engineering on a scholarship, and who was the last living piece of their family, and who had no idea that the world his sister had just stepped into had a very long memory and very little patience for loose ends. She went to her father church on 168th Street every week because it was the place she felt most like herself. She was not supposed to be here. The jury summons had arrived on a Wednesday morning in September, and she had tried to get out of it. Filed for postponement. Denied. She had shown up at the courthouse with a tote bag full of ungraded papers, fully expecting to be dismissed within the first hour. She was not dismissed. The case of the state of New York versus Kang Jae-won took 11 days. She turned onto Broadway and checked behind her. A man in a dark coat she did not recognize was standing at the edge of the courthouse steps, looking in her direction. Not the same man as the gray sedan, a different one. She turned forward and walked faster. The prosecution had built their case carefully over 11 days. Kang Jae-won was not simply a wealthy businessman with a complicated portfolio. He was, according to the federal government of the United States, the operating head of one of the most sophisticated Korean organized crime networks ever established on American soil. An empire built over 12 years that moved money across 7 states through a web of legitimate businesses. Real estate holdings in New York, Chicago, and Miami. Restaurant groups across the eastern seaboard. A private equity firm in Midtown Manhattan that managed accounts for people who could not afford to have their money traced. $400 million over 6 years. 3 deaths connected to organizations that had tried to compete with or expose his operation. All 3 ruled inconclusive by law enforcement. All 3 quietly filed away by investigators who had apparently decided that some cases were better left at inconclusive. That was the man the crowd had parted for. That was the man who had just kissed her on the courthouse steps. She turned onto Chambers Street and checked behind her again. The man in the dark coat was half a block back. Matching her pace exactly. She did not run. She pulled out her phone and kept walking and kept thinking. The prosecution's star witness had been a former associate named Dennis Cho, who took the stand on day 4 and spoke for 2 full days with the smooth precision of a man who had rehearsed every word until the rough edges were gone. And that smoothness was exactly what Amara had noticed. Her father had spent 30 years in a pulpit, and she had sat in the front row for most of those years watching him preach about discernment. About the difference between performed truth and actual truth. About how a lie rehearsed long enough started to sound more convincing than the truth itself, because the truth never practiced. The truth just was. And the places where truth was uncertain, or incomplete, or painful, were the very places that made it real. Those rough places were not weaknesses in a true account. They were the proof of it. Dennis Cho had no rough places. His emotional responses arrived slightly after his words instead of with them. His memory of 11 years working alongside one of the most dangerous men in the country had no uncertain places. No incomplete places. No moments where it stumbled the way real memory always stumbled when it encountered something painful or shameful or complicated. The man was performing a memory he did not actually have. She could not prove it. But she knew it the way she knew the things her father had sharpened in her over 30 years of watching from the front row. Not as opinion, as operational fact. She crossed the street mid-block and glanced back. The man in the dark coat crossed with her. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Same unknown number. "You looked good in court today." She felt the cold move through her chest. They had been watching her inside the courtroom. Not just today. For 11 days they had been watching. Which meant they had been watching when she voted. Which meant they knew exactly what she had done and exactly why the case had collapsed. She kept walking. The subway entrance was half a block ahead. When the jury had retired to deliberate, 11 people had voted guilty within 2 hours. 11 people who had looked at the documents and the financial records and the expert testimony And Dennis Cho's smooth-polished account and concluded that the case was made. Amara had voted not guilty. She had held that position for 2 full days while 11 people presented every argument available to them. She had said the same thing every time. I cannot vote to take 11 years of a man life based on testimony I believe was manufactured. I will not do it. The jury hung, the case collapsed. Kang Jae-won, the most feared Korean organized crime figure operating in the United States, walked out of the Manhattan courthouse a free man, and now someone who had been watching her for 11 days was half a block behind her on a street in Lower Manhattan, and her phone was buzzing with messages that knew where she lived. She reached the subway entrance and went down the stairs fast. She did not look back. She did not need to. She could hear the footsteps behind her on the stairs. She got home at 4:30 and stood in her doorway and understood immediately that someone had been inside. Nothing broken, nothing taken. But everything moved, just enough. A chair at a different angle. Books reordered on her shelf. Items on her bathroom counter rearranged with a deliberate, unhurried care that was more frightening than destruction would have been. Because destruction said, "We are angry." This said, "We are patient." And patient was worse. She stood in the middle of her living room with her keys still in her hand and her heart rate climbing and her mind moving fast through her options. Call the police? And say what? Someone rearranged my books. Call her brother. And pull Kofi into something she did not yet understand. Put the last person she loved on the radar of people who left patient rearranged messages in other people's apartments. Run. To where? Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Did you find our message? She put the phone in her pocket. She sat down on the floor right where she was standing. She opened her father Bible to the page he had dog-eared so many times the corner had gone soft as cloth. The leather of the cover was worn smooth at the spine from 30 years of daily handling. It still smelled faintly of the study in the house on Memorial Drive, where Reverend Emmanuel Osei had spent his mornings before the rest of the family woke up. Coffee and old paper and something that was just him. Psalm 91. She read it the way he had taught her. Not as poetry, as a statement of operational fact, as a description of what was actually true about her situation, regardless of what her situation looked like from the outside. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. She read it twice. Then she stood up, packed a bag, and left the apartment without knowing where she was going. She was 2 blocks away when a black car pulled alongside her and the window came down. The man behind the wheel was Korean, 50s. Neat in the way of men who worked for powerful people and understood that their appearance reflected something larger than themselves. Miss Osei, he said. My employer would like to speak with you. He believes you may be in some difficulty tonight. She looked at the man. She looked up and down the street. The November wind was moving old leaves along the gutter. A delivery truck idled at the corner. Somewhere above her, a window was lit warm yellow against the early dark. She thought about the gray sedan outside the courthouse. The man who had held her gaze for 3 seconds. The man in the dark coat on the stairs. The rearranged apartment. The patient, threatening texts. Kofi in Atlanta, who had no idea any of this was happening. She thought about her mother who used to say, "Baby, safety is not the same thing as rightness. Sometimes the right thing is the one that costs you something." She got in the car. The building on East 74th Street did not announce itself. No name on the door. Just a number and a doorman who was clearly more than a doorman and who looked at her with the careful attention of someone who had already been told to expect her and had already assessed her before she rang the bell. She was taken to the top floor in an elevator that opened directly into a living space occupying the entire level. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing Central Park. The park was dark and bare below, November having stripped the trees down to their essential honesty. The furniture in the room was precise and understated. Dark wood, clean lines, no excess. The kind of space that had been arranged not to impress, but to think in. And then there was the quiet, not the absence of sound. Something more specific than that, a quality of silence that she had not encountered before. The quiet of a space where everything unnecessary had already been decided and removed, where nothing was present that had not earned its place. It settled around her the moment she stepped out of the elevator, and it felt like the inside of a mind that had been running at full capacity for a very long time and had learned to make peace with its own weight. He was standing at the window. He turned when the elevator opened. In the courtroom, he had been contained, controlled, present in the way of a man who had decided the proceedings around him were something he was observing rather than participating in. Here he was, simply himself, and simply himself was considerable. Up close, in the quiet of his own space, he was more than the courtroom had shown her. The stillness was the same, but it had a different quality here. Not the performed restraint of a man on trial. Just the natural gravity of someone who had been the most powerful person in every room he had entered for long enough that it had stopped requiring any effort. He gestured to the seating area. "Please," he said. She sat. He sat across from her. No pleasantries, no preamble. "Why?" he said. "Because your witness was lying," she said, "and I could not vote to take your freedom based on a lie, regardless of what else I believed about you." He was quiet for a moment. "You believed other things about me? It was not a question." "Yes," she said. "I believed some of what the prosecution presented, the financial structures, some of the documented connections. I am not sitting here telling you I think you are innocent of everything they alleged. I am telling you I could not convict you on Dennis Cho testimony because Dennis Cho was performing, and I have been watching people perform truth my whole life. I know what it looks like. The rough places are missing. Real memory has rough places. His did not." He looked at her steadily for a long moment. "Cho was lying," he said. "You were correct. He was paid to testify by an organization called Iron Crest. They operate out of Atlanta and Miami. They run debt coercion networks, money laundering operations, and human trafficking routes across the southeastern United States. They have been trying to remove me from the board for 2 years because my organization sits across 3 territories they want. They use the prosecution case as their vehicle. His testimony was fabricated over 8 months with the help of 3 people whose names I now have." She absorbed this. "The texts," she said. "The man outside the courthouse. The man who followed me on the street. The apartment." He did not look surprised. "Iron Crest," he said. "They have identified you as the variable that collapsed their plan. The lead prosecutor is also building a jury tampering case against you. He intends to file within 6 weeks." She felt the floor shift. "That is not what happened," she said. "I know that," he said. "But he does not need it to be true. He needs it to be believable enough to destroy your credibility and explain the hung jury in a way that does not reflect on his case." She looked at him. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She waited. "I asked you here because you made a decision that put you in danger, and I am the reason you are in that danger," he said, "and I am not comfortable with that. You kissed me on the courthouse steps in front of every camera in Manhattan? She said. Yes. Why? Because you were standing there alone, he said. And the cameras were already on you. And in that moment, I made a calculation. Connecting you publicly to me was better protection than leaving you standing there as a loose end that anyone could reach for. A calculation, she said. Yes. She nodded slowly. And was it only a calculation? She said. The question moved through his expression like something he had not prepared for. He did not answer it. Instead, he said, I would like to propose an arrangement. He laid it out without softening any edge of it. His legal team could surface the evidence of Cho manufactured testimony and present it publicly before the prosecutor could file. This was achievable, but it required 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, she was exposed. Iron Crest was watching her. The prosecution was watching her. She was a thread, and there were people who would pull it the moment they thought it led somewhere useful. He was proposing she stay. In this building, under his protection, for 6 weeks. Full access to his legal team. Full transparency at every step. She stood and walked to the window. She looked out at Central Park below. The trees stripped bare by November. All that summer architecture gone. Only the true essential shape of each tree remaining. She stood looking at them for a moment, thinking about how you could not see what something really was until everything unnecessary had been removed. She thought this was probably true of more than trees. She did not say it aloud. She thought about Kofi studying in Atlanta right now with no idea that the people who had arranged her apartment were the kind of people who used brothers as leverage. The kind of people who did not send final warnings. She turned back. I want full transparency, she said. Every step, every development, agreed. I want to speak to my brother whenever I choose, without restriction, without monitoring, agreed. And I want it understood that I am here because I chose to be here, and I can choose to leave. Those two things do not change regardless of what develops. He looked at her for a long moment. Agreed, he said. And Miss Osei. She looked at him. I do not make agreements I do not intend to keep, he said. Whatever else you believe. About me? Believe that. I know, she said. That was the other thing I noticed about you in that courtroom. Everyone in that room was performing something. Except you. You were just sitting there being exactly what you were, and not apologizing for it. Something moved in his expression, brief and real and gone almost before it arrived. You are a very unusual person, Amara Osei, he said. She picked up her bag. I need to get a few things from my apartment, she said. I will be back within the hour. She walked to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she turned back. The courthouse steps, she said. Was it only a calculation? He looked at her across the room. A pause long enough to mean something. No, he said quietly. It was not only a calculation. The doors closed. She stood in the descending elevator with the hum of it in her bones and her heart doing something entirely outside her control, and thought, Lord, whatever this is, please do not let me be foolish about it. Right here is where I need to pause, because what just happened in that elevator is exactly why stories like this one matter. She walked into that building alone with no protection and no guarantee, and nothing except the clarity of a woman who knew the difference between a lie and the truth, and had the courage to act on that knowledge even when it cost her everything familiar. That kind of courage does not announce itself. It does not wait for the right moment or the right circumstances. It just moves when it has to. If that is speaking to something in you right now, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. A friend, a sister, Someone in your life who is in the middle of a hard decision and needs to be reminded that doing the right thing alone still counts. Subscribe if you have not already, and keep watching because what happens next is going to change everything for both of them. We are not even close to done. Marcus and Jin were assigned to her before she left the building. 2 men. Solid and quiet and professional in the way of people who had been doing this long enough that vigilance had become invisible. They drove her to her apartment. She went up alone, packed what she needed in 20 minutes. Her father Bible, the photograph of her parents on their wedding day, her mother laughing at something outside the frame, her father looking at her mother with the expression of a man who has found the proof of everything he ever believed. Her brother's first-grade report card, which she had kept for no practical reason, except that keeping it felt like keeping her family present, and her family was the only thing in the world she was not willing to lose. She was coming back down the stairwell when Marcus appeared at the bottom. His expression had changed. "We need to move," he said. "Now." She moved. They were in the car and pulling away from the curb in under 45 seconds. She looked back through the rear window. 2 men were coming out of her building entrance, moving fast, looking at the departing car with the specific attention of people who had just missed something they had been waiting for. She turned forward and breathed slowly. "That was close," she said. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "That was a warning," he said. If they had wanted to move tonight, they would not have come through the front door. She understood what that meant. Tonight was a message. Tomorrow would be something else entirely. She moved into the penthouse that evening. Mrs. Park met her at the elevator with a warm handshake and the particular composed energy of a woman who had served a powerful household for long enough that nothing surprised her and everything was handled before you thought to ask. She showed Amara to a room on the east side, windows facing the park, a bathroom larger than her queen's kitchen. Clean and quiet, and that same quality of silence she had noticed when she first arrived. Settling around her like something intentional. "I will have something warm sent up," Mrs. Park said. "You have had a long day." Amara looked at her. "Has he always lived like this?" she asked, alone in all of this space. Mrs. Park was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Kang," she said carefully, "has lived in a way that made sense for what his life required of him." She paused. "He brought someone here once before, a long time ago." She did not stay. She found the quiet difficult. She said it felt like living inside someone else's decision. She said it without judgment, without implication, just as a fact handed over with quiet significance. Amara nodded slowly. "I do not find it difficult," she said. "The quiet." Mrs. Park looked at her for a moment. "No," she said. "I did not think you would." She left. Amara stood in the room for a moment, thinking about what it meant that a man who had spent 12 years building himself into someone unreachable had brought her here. That Mrs. Park had been in this household long enough to know the difference between a guest and something else entirely. She called Kofi. He answered on the second ring the way he always did, his voice carrying that brightness their mother had given him, the particular gift of meeting the world with more warmth than it had earned. She told him where she was. Not everything. Enough. He was quiet for a moment. "Amara?" he said. "I know," she said. "Is this about the jury thing? It is everywhere online. There is a photograph of you, and I know." She said. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she said. "I believe I am." She almost told him then. About Iron Crest. About the men outside the building. about the specific way organizations like that use the people you love to reach the people they needed. But Kofi had a chemistry exam on Thursday, and a life that was still clean and untouched, and she was not ready to hand him the weight of this until she had to. She would protect him the way she had always protected him, by carrying what he could not yet carry. "Call me Sunday," she said. "Every Sunday," he said. "Same as always." She put the phone down and opened her father Bible. Her eyes landed on a note in the margin beside Proverbs 21, his looping handwriting. "The heart of a king is in the hand of the Lord." Underneath it, in smaller letters, added later in different ink. "And so is the heart of every person who frightens us. Nothing is outside his reach. Nothing." She sat with that for a long time. Then she heard it, a sound from somewhere below in the building. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a sound that did not belong at 11 o'clock at night in a building this secure. A pressure change. A door that should not have been opening. She sat completely still. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, stay in your room," he said. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me or Mr. Kang." She locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the building around her, and she prayed with the focused quiet of someone who had learned that panic was a luxury and clarity was a necessity. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 5. Somewhere below her she heard 2 quick sounds she could not identify, and then a silence that felt different from the silence before them. Then nothing. 12 minutes later, a knock. "Miss Osei, it is Marcus." She opened the door. Marcus was calm, but there was something in the set of his jaw that had not been there before. "What happened?" she said. "Someone got into the parking structure," he said. "They did not get past it, but they were carrying something that tells us they were not here to talk." She absorbed this. "Iron Crest?" she said. He nodded once. "Mr. Kang would like to speak with you," he said. Jae-won was in his office, standing at the window the way he always stood when something significant was either approaching or resolving. But different now. Something moving underneath the surface of that stillness that had not been there before. She sat down without being asked. He turned. "They got into the building," she said. "They got into the parking structure," he said. "Not the building. My people stopped them before they reached the elevator. But it tells us they are not waiting for the 6-week window. They are moving now?" "How long do we have?" she said. "If we file the Cho evidence tonight," he said, "we eliminate their primary motivation for reaching you. Once it is public record, removing you accomplishes nothing because the evidence exists independent of you. My legal team can be ready by morning, but it means working through the night." "Then we work through the night," she said. He looked at her. "You understand what it means that they reach the parking structure tonight?" he said. "Yes," she said. "And you are not leaving." She looked at him steadily. "Where exactly would you suggest I go?" she said. Something shifted in his expression. "You could be frightened," he said. "Most people would be frightened right now." "I am absolutely frightened," she said. "I am just not letting it make my decisions." He held her gaze for a long moment. "My father had that quality," she said quietly. "I have been trying to inherit it my whole life. I did not always believe I had it. But tonight, I think maybe it took." He crossed the room and sat in the chair beside the desk. Not behind it. Nothing between them. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "What you did in that jury room," he said, "holding that position alone for 2 full days against 11 people. I want you to understand that I know what that cost. I have been in rooms where the pressure was considerable. I have stood in places where the easier option was available, And the right option was not easy, and I chose the right one anyway. And I paid for it, and I understood what I was paying when I paid it. He paused. But I have never done it for a stranger, he said. Never purely because it was true and right, and the alternative was something I could not live with. I have done it for my organization, for my people, for my sister a long time ago, when doing it for her was the reason I built everything I have built. But not for a stranger, not simply because it was true. That is a different kind of strength from anything I have ever exercised. It comes from somewhere I do not have access to. And I want you to know that I know the difference between what you did and what I am capable of, because I think you deserve to be seen accurately, not flattered, accurately. The room was quiet. Outside the window, New York moved through its night, all that light and motion and magnificent indifference to the small, enormous things happening inside the buildings it contained. She looked at this man whose name made crowds part without deciding to move, who had sat through 11 days of testimony designed to dismantle him without flinching once, who was sitting across from her right now with Ironcrest already moving through his building saying, "I do not have what you have," with the honesty of someone who had decided that the truth of this moment was worth more than the protection of his image. She believed him, the way she believed the things her father had sharpened in her, not because it was comfortable, because it was real. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. He nodded. They sat in the quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then her phone buzzed on the desk between them. "Marcus, 2 more vehicles just parked on East 74th, Marcus said. "They are not moving." She looked at Jae-won. He was already reaching for his own phone. "Get the legal team on a call," he said. "Right now. All of them. We file tonight." He looked at her. "Ready?" he said. She picked up her phone. "Ready," she said. They had been working for 40 minutes when she saw it, a document on the corner of Jae-won's desk. Not hidden, not displayed. Just present the way things were present on the desk of a man who was managing many things simultaneously and had not thought to move it before she sat down. A name on the top line. Reverend Marcus Webb, Atlanta, Georgia. She knew that name. She had known that name since she was 12 years old, sitting in the second row of a church on Memorial Drive, while Marcus Webb stood in the pulpit as her father's closest friend and fellow minister, and preached with the kind of conviction that made you believe the words were coming from somewhere more reliable than a person. She set her laptop down. She picked up the document. Jae-won looked up from his phone. She turned the document so he could see what she was holding. "Marcus Webb," she said. "Tell me what this is." He looked at it, then at her. "Put it down," he said. "It is not relevant to tonight." "I will decide what is relevant to me," she said. "Tell me what this is." A long moment. "He is connected to Ironcrest Atlanta operation," Jae-won said. "He has been laundering money through his church accounts for 3 years, approximately $4 million. His participation is not coerced. He approached them. She sat with that. She sat with it the way you sat with something that had the specific weight of a world you thought you understood, turning out to have a different shape underneath. "That man," she said carefully, "stood at my father's graveside. He held my mother's hand when she was dying. He called me every birthday for 15 years after my parents were gone. He is one of 3 people left in the world who knew my father." Jae-won said nothing. "Are you certain?" she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. She wanted him to be wrong. She sat with how much she wanted him to be wrong, and she let herself want it for exactly 5 seconds, and then she set the wanting down. Because she had spent 11 days in a jury room recognizing the difference between what she wanted to be true and what was actually true. And the faculty her father had built in her did not turn itself off for people she loved. That was the entire point of it. That was the thing that made it worth having. My father used to say, she said slowly, that truth was not kind or unkind. It was just true. And the only question was whether you were brave enough to let it be true, even when it cost you something you loved. She paused. He meant it as a gift, the ability to let the truth be true. He said it was the only real freedom a person had. She looked at Jae-won. I hate that you are right about this, she said. I know, he said quietly. And I am not going to pretend that what you do and what he did are the same thing, she said. They are not. I am not confused about that. But I want you to understand that for me, this is not tactical information. This is a grief. And I need you to let it be a grief for a moment before it becomes anything else. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. He crossed to a cabinet along the wall and opened it and poured something into a glass and brought it back and set it in front of her without a word. She looked at it. She looked at him. It is tea, he said. Mrs. Park keeps it here. I do not know why. I have never used it before tonight. Something shifted in her chest. She picked up the glass. Thank you, she said. He sat back down. He did not say we should get back to work. He did not say we do not have time for this. He did not say anything at all. He just sat across from her in the quiet of his office and let her have the 3 minutes it took to sit with a grief that was real and true and deserved to be acknowledged even in the middle of a night when everything else was also happening. She had not expected that from him. She thought she probably should have. Then her phone buzzed. Marcus. One of them moved around the block. They are repositioning. She set down the glass. She opened her laptop. All right, she said. Let us finish this. The next 3 hours were a race. She sat with the legal team by video call while they assembled the Cho evidence for filing. She answered every question with precision, provided the texture and detail of what she had observed in seat number 7. The moments where Cho testimony had the texture of rehearsal rather than memory. The emotional responses arriving after the words instead of with them. The smoothness that had no rough places where truth always had rough places. Across the glass partition, Jae-won worked without stopping, moving between calls, reviewing documents, his sleeves rolled up, his jacket long since abandoned, operating with the focused efficiency of a man who had navigated situations like this before and intended to navigate out of this one the same way. At 1 a.m, Patricia Choi, the lead attorney, said we have a problem. Everyone on the call went still. One of the Cho documents has a filing classification issue, she said. If we submit it as is, the opposition can have it thrown out on procedural grounds. We need an hour to correct it. Amara looked through the glass at Jae-won. He was already looking at her. 30 seconds later, Marcus appeared in the doorway. They just moved 2 men to the service entrance, he said. She looked at Patricia Choi on the screen. Fix the document, she said. You have 45 minutes. Patricia Choi held her gaze for a moment. 45 minutes, she said. Everyone work. Jae-won was in the doorway before she could stand up. We need to move you up, he said. Secure room, no external access points. She picked up her laptop. Then let us go, she said. They moved through the penthouse quickly. Up a private staircase, into a room that was smaller than the one below, but solid in the way of a room specifically designed with exactly this kind of night in mind. Reinforced walls, no windows. A single lamp throwing warm light across 2 chairs and a small table. And that same quality of silence. Deeper here. more intentional. The kind of quiet that said whatever is happening out there cannot reach in here. She sat down and opened the laptop and rejoined the legal call. Jae-won sat across from her and worked from his phone. For 20 minutes, the only sounds were keyboards and quiet voices, and the particular focused silence of people doing necessary work under real pressure. Then, Marcus' voice came through Jae-won's phone. "Service entrance is clear." They pulled back. Jae-won looked at her. She kept her eyes on the screen. 2 minutes later, Patricia Choi said, "Document is corrected. We are ready to file." Amara looked at Jae-won. "File it," she said. Patricia filed at 2:17 in the morning. The room went completely quiet. Jae-won put his phone down. She closed her laptop. "It is done?" she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at her hands, completely steady. She was mildly surprised by that. Neither of them moved for a while after that. The particular quiet of 2 in the morning settled around them in the small room above the 53rd floor. "You should sleep," he said eventually. "So should you," she said. He almost smiled. She had never seen him come that close before. She leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked at her. "Your sister," she said, "in Seoul." He went still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. "Mrs. Park told you?" he said. "Mrs. Park told me nothing," she said. "You told me yourself. When you said you built everything for someone a long time ago and that doing it for a stranger was different, I just filled in the rest." A long pause. "Is she safe now?" Amara said. "Yes," he said. "She has been safe for 11 years. She does not know what it costs to keep her that way. I do not tell her." "Why not?" Amara said. "Because she would ask me to stop," he said. "And I cannot stop, and I do not want to make her carry the weight of knowing that." Amara looked at him for a long moment. "You have been protecting people in silence your whole life," she said. "Have you not?" He looked at her. "It is the only way I know how to do it," he said. She nodded slowly. "My father was like that too," she said. "He never told us what things cost him. He just paid the cost and made sure we never felt the absence of what he gave up. I only understood it after he was gone, when I found his notebooks." She was quiet for a moment. "He wrote everything down," she said. "Everything he carried, everything he prayed about in the dark. 30 years of it, and none of it ever showed on his face. He just kept showing up." Jae-won was looking at her with that expression again. The one she had no language for. "He sounds like someone worth knowing," he said. "He was," she said. "He really was." They sat in the quiet a little longer. At some point, Amara closed her eyes for what she thought would be a moment. She woke at 5:45 to the sound of the city beginning its morning, 4 floors below. The lamp was still on. Jae-won was in the other chair, not asleep, just sitting, looking at something in the middle, distance that had nothing to do with the room around him. He did not know she was awake yet, and in the unguarded moment before he registered her watching him, she saw something in his face she had not seen there before. Not the stillness, not the control, not the precision that had been present in every interaction since the courthouse steps. Something quieter than all of those things. Something that looked like a man sitting with the specific weight of caring about something again after a very long time of making sure he did not. Then he sensed her watching, and the expression reorganized itself back into the one she knew. But she had seen it, and she filed it in the part of herself that was paying attention to everything. The filing went public at 6:14 in the morning, on every major news platform by 9. New evidence suggests star witness in Kang trial was paid to testify. Federal investigation into jury tampering allegations against juror reversed as attention turns to prosecution sources. Amara read it on the edge of her bed with her first cup of tea and felt something move through her that was not triumph and not relief, but something quieter than both. The specific satisfaction of a true shape being restored after someone had tried to bend it into something false. She called Kofi. He had already seen it. "I told you," he said. "I told you God was not going to let it go sideways." "You told me that?" she said. "Are you okay?" "I am okay," she said. "And the man, Kang, whatever his name is, are you okay about him too?" She was quiet for a moment. "That is a more complicated question," she said. Kofi laughed. Their mother laughed. She felt it in her chest like something being gently pressed. "Amara," he said, "let me tell you what I see from here." She waited. "You were the only one who voted to set him free. You held that room alone for 2 days. And then he kissed you on the courthouse steps in front of the whole world. Not because of a calculation, because you were standing there and you were you, and he had never met anyone like you before, and he did not know what to do with that except move toward it." He paused. "That man," Kofi said, "did not put a security detail on you because it was strategic. He did it because something in him recognized something in you, and he did not know how to protect it, except the only way he has ever known how to protect anything." She was quiet for a long moment. "You are not a complicated question kind of woman," Kofi said. "You are an answer kind of woman. You always have been. Mama always said so." She smiled. "Call me Sunday," she said. "Every Sunday," he said. "Same as always." She put the phone down. She got up and went to find Jae-won. He was in his office. He had not slept. Same clothes as the night before. Jacket still off. Sleeves still rolled. The physical evidence of the long night visible in the lines of his face and the set of his shoulders. He was standing at the window the way he always stood when something significant was either approaching or resolving. He turned when she came in. She held up her phone with the headline visible. He looked at it. He looked at her. "It is done?" she said. "Yes," he said. "It is done." She put her phone in her pocket. "So I can go home?" she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression moved and settled, and moved again, like a man negotiating with himself. "Yes," he said. "You can go home." Neither of them moved. Outside the window, the park was bare and honest and entirely itself. November trees stripped to their essential shapes in the morning light. She looked at them and understood finally what she had been noticing since the courthouse steps. You could not see what something truly was until everything unnecessary had been removed. The summer, the performance, the protection, all of it stripped away until only the true shape remained. She had been stripped of everything familiar in the last 24 hours. And what was left, standing here in the morning light in a penthouse on the Upper East Side, looking at a man who had kissed her without calculation, was the truest version of herself she had ever stood inside. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. "I have a question," she said. He waited. "The courthouse steps," she said. "If I had not been standing there, if the cameras had not been on me, if there had been no strategic calculation available to justify it, would you still have done it?" He looked at her for the longest pause she had ever witnessed from a man who always had the next thing prepared and ready. "Yes," he said. She nodded. Then she said, "I am going to go home and get the rest of my things and come back. Not because I am in danger, not because of any arrangement, but because I would like to keep having breakfast with you. And I would like to know who you are outside of all of this, And I think you would like to know who I am too." He looked at her with that expression she had been trying to read since the courthouse steps. The one that had no name yet, but was becoming one. "I would like that," he said quietly. She turned to go. "Amara," he said. She turned back. He crossed the room in 3 steps, and he kissed her again. Not like the courthouse steps. Not public, not calculated, not for cameras or strategy or the complex mathematics of a world built on power and consequence. Just for her. Just because she was standing there being exactly who she was. A 3rd-grade teacher from Queens who had voted her conscience alone for 2 full days. Who had stayed in a building while Iron Crest repositioned outside because running was not available to her. Who had sat with a grief for 3 minutes in the middle of a crisis because the grief was real and deserved to be acknowledged. Who had asked a man about his sister at 2 in the morning and heard his real answer and not looked away from it. Just because she was Amara. She kissed him back. Outside the window, the park was bare and honest and entirely itself, and the city moved through its morning with its usual magnificent indifference to the small and enormous things happening inside the buildings it contained. Inside one of those buildings, on the 53rd floor, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely architecture stood in the morning light and chose each other. Without calculation, without strategy, without anything except the simple, difficult, courageous fact of it. Before we close tonight, I want to speak to you directly. Amara Osei walked into a courtroom as a 3rd-grade teacher from Queens with a tote bag full of ungraded papers and the deep, quiet faith of a woman raised by a man who believed that God did not put people in rooms by accident. She walked out as a woman whose life had been permanently altered by the weight of a single righteous choice. She did not choose this path. She did not apply for it. She did not have the luxury of counting the cost before she paid it because the moment arrived before the calculation was possible. But here is what I want you to carry from her story tonight. Truth is not kind or unkind. It is just true. And the only question is whether you are brave enough to let it be true, even when it costs you something you love. Amara has been answering that question her whole life. Tonight, she answered it again. If this story meant something to you tonight, I am asking you to do 3 things. Like this video. Every like tells us this kind of storytelling matters and helps more people find it. Subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this every week, and we do not want you to miss a single one. And leave a comment. Tell us what part of Amara's story you will carry with you. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what truth cost you something this year. We are building something real here. A community of people who believe stories carry weight, who believe love worth having costs something real, who believe courage in an ordinary moment still counts even when no one is watching. We will see you in the next one.